Could we see a huge trade between the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs? Reports indicate that talks are intensifying on a potential big trade involving Matt Murray. Plus, we're going to also continue to look at the goalie carousel. Lots of other goalie news on the UFA market here as well. Plus, we're going to talk about the Philadephia Flyers. They might be moving one of their top defensemen. Plus, we have some other signings, injury updates, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. First up, we got some signings to discuss. The Colorado Avalanche have come to terms with their newly acquired goaltender Alexander Georgiev, who they acquired recently here from the New York Rangers. They've signed the RFA to a 3-year deal at value at $3.4 million per season. So that's a pretty decent deal, I think, for somebody who is expected to be the starting goaltender. They made that clear after making the acquisition that he's not going to play, less than Pavel Francouz. He is expected to be the starter. Probably more of a 1A, 1B combination would be my guess. But Georgiev likely would still kind of be the go-to guy for their, more, tougher matchups would be my assumption here based on what the Avalanche have said after making this acquisition. So to have two goaltenders who are capable of running that kind of tandem, for between $5 and $6 million is pretty good. So that's pretty good deal. The Avalanche should just get done proving this year that you can win the Stanley Cup without having elite level goaltending if your defense in front of you is extremely good, and of course if you can score lots of goals. Now, there's not every team can do that, but the Avalanche, the way they're built, were able to pull it off, and I dare say that their goaltending should be comparable moving forward as it was recently. Now, on to some other signings. We announced a bunch of Islander signings yesterday, and apparently Lou wasn't done. He's also signed young forward Otto Koivulla to a 2-year contract as well. He gets a 2-way deal in the first year, but the second year is a 1-way deal. So that's obviously important as well. They saw the same thing with some players yesterday, getting 1-way contracts for the second or third years of their contract, as the Islanders will slowly start kind of building in some of these younger players here over the next couple of years, which is important since they do very much have an older team. We also got word as well that the Chicago Blackhawks are definitely not qualifying a couple of pretty important players that will certainly get a lot of attention on the UFA market once they officially become unrestricted free agents. Of course, we'll find out by the end of tomorrow for 100% confirmation on what players have received their qualifying offers and who hasn't. Anybody who hasn't can become a UFA. Now, of course, that includes Dylan Strome and Dominic Kubalik in Chicago. I mean, Chicago is basically giving these players away. This is kind of mind-blowing to me. I mean, I know they're not, elite level players that are getting tons of attention on the trade market, but you would think that they'd be able to find a trade for these players, for something, even if it's not anything great, even if it's a mid, round pick, 5th round pick, 6th round pick, something, another prospect that maybe will flourish in a few years. Like, anything is better than letting them walk for nothing. Now, I understand the qualifying offers are not ideal for their recent performances, which is why they don't want to qualify them. But you would think that there would be another team that they might be able to find a trade to get their signing rights and get them signed to something less than their qualifying offer. Something like, anyways, it's just mind-blowing to me. Kyle Davidson has done a very odd, not very good job here recently. I'm going to give him a really big-time failing grade. I don't think they get enough on the Kirby Dach trade. I don't think they get nearly enough on the Alex DeBrincat trade. And now they're letting Strome and Kubalik walk. They're certainly heading down the road of tanking for next season. There is no doubt about that. Like I said before in yesterday's video, I'll be very interested to see what kind of reactions we get from players like Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, who had previously made it known that they were willing to stick around and help for this rebuild in the final year of their contract at least, maybe even extend their time beyond that. I have to think they might be singing a different tune here now, and we'll probably find out more on that in the next week or so would be my assumption. Now, onto some other news. We did get word from Chris Johnson in his recent podcast after the NHL draft, indicating that while in Montreal, he found out that goaltender Braden Holtby is unlikely to play this year and very well might end up retiring. He may not be able to play anymore. Spent a lot of time on injured reserve last year. Of course, he would have been an unrestricted free agent. So that takes yet another goalie off the goalie carousel that's been going round and round here with lots of movement since leading into the draft and going towards free agency now. So we'll see, but not looking good for a return for Braden Holtby, but we'll probably get confirmation on that sometime soon here as well. Talking about some other goaltenders that are on the market and what the rumor is, Darren Dreger reported today that the Maple Leafs did indeed have another conversation with Jack Campbell. Looks like Dubas met either with Campbell himself or his agent. He described the meeting as friendly but unproductive. So basically, nothing has changed. It doesn't sound like the Leafs have increased what they're willing to offer Campbell, and it certainly doesn't sound like Campbell's willing to take anything less. I would say that Campbell's camp is probably hearing, based on what the market is expecting, that he's probably going to get what he wants from another team. So unless the Leafs want to pony up, he's likely going to have to cash in elsewhere. Campbell's a prime example of a player who, you know what, he hasn't really made a lot of money in comparison to a lot of his peers. He's a bit of a late bloomer. He's been playing on fairly cheap contracts, and it could be his one and only time to really cash in on a bigger contract. I know a lot of people sometimes give players grief for how much money they make, but you got to remember that their ability to earn money at this level is limited. It's a very short window, and most of these guys are done in the NHL on average before the age of 30. The ones that are really good and can stick around maybe to the age of 35. Well, most people don't retire till way older than that, right? It's not like they're going to be making millions of dollars for eternity for the rest of their life. So they have to take advantage while the getting's good, right? So obviously the no change on Campbell has kind of led us to the other big news of the day, which Elliotte Friedman has sent out on Twitter earlier, indicating that trade talks between the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs have intensified around a deal concerning Matt Murray. The goaltender, of course, signed a 4-year contract with the Senators after being acquired from the Pittsburgh Penguins a couple of years ago. Things have not worked out, and the Senators have been actively trying to move on from him this offseason. They've been fairly big players in the trade market so far, acquiring Alex DeBrincat, and they've been involved in several other conversations around other parts of the team that they want to make upgrades to, and moving on from Matt Murray is something that they've been pretty aggressive trying to accomplish. They almost had a trade with the Buffalo Sabres, which thankfully for them did not work out. Murray ended up vetoing the trade because the Sabres were part of his modified no trade list. Because their first round pick would have been included in that deal, which they ultimately ended up using to get Alex DeBrincat. Now, I've seen a lot of talk on social media the last few hours since Friedman broke this news. A lot of Leaf fans especially indicating that they're going to get this big sweetener for the Leafs to take Murray. I don't see that being the case. Now, are they going to have to get a sweetener of some sort? Sure. But I've seen some, mock trades suggesting that they're going to get, 3, 4, 5 decent prospects out of Ottawa, or it's not something ridiculous. And it's just not really realistic at all. And now, of course, we don't know when the trade is going to be exactly, but in my opinion, it sounds like it's going to be a complicated trade. And I'm going to suggest that there's more than likely, we'll find out if indeed it takes place, that there's going to be a third team involved. I think you're looking at teams with a lot of cap space, like whether it be in Arizona, Detroit, Chicago, like any of those teams that have space that they can basically rent out will probably retain half of Murray's salary for Ottawa to make it cheaper. So you'll probably see Ottawa retain as much as they can, and then another team come in and retain as much as they can as well to cut that cap hit down substantially. I don't know what that works out to, because Murray's making 6.25, so that cuts Murray's salary down well under $3 million. It'd be like 2.5, 2.75, something like that would be whatever it'd get to. So ultimately, that's a big savings for the Leafs. So the Senators would probably pay a third team, I don't know, some kind of a draft pick, maybe a prospect, to retain some salary, and then they would send that the retained salary on their part plus that one to the Leafs, so they get Murray pretty cheaply. There could be other pieces involved. Wouldn't be shocked if they included Connor Brown going back to the Leafs. He's got 1 year left on his contract, and he's expressed the desire to go into free agency at the end of next year. At this rate, Connor Brown's been a good player for the Senators. I don't think he's irreplaceable, and I don't think that he's a player that they really want to take the chance of losing for nothing next year. So wouldn't be shocking if somebody like him is involved. There could be another pick or a prospect. I just don't think it's going to be overly extensive. You got to remember, them keeping all that salary is a sweetener as well. So certainly, that's the part that makes it complicated. And if the Sens are going to have to pay a third party to knock that salary down as well, then that's going to be less going to the Leafs. The Leafs at the end of the day are going to get themselves a cheap goaltender and maybe a little something else. That's hard to say. I don't know what exactly this is all going to be involved. There could be other pieces. The Leafs might send a contract back to the Senators as well. They might want to part with, I don't know, Alex Kerfoot. They might want to part with the final year of Justin Hall. I don't really know what it's going to be, but there could be something like that in there as well. It's really difficult to say. I mean, at the end of the day, we know that there's a connection here with the Leafs and Matt Murray. We know Kyle Dubas continuously goes back to his roots in Sault Ste. Marie with the Greyhounds. He and, of course, Sheldon Keefe had success there, and they keep going back to players continuously that they're familiar with. And, of course, yes, in case you're wondering, Matt Murray was a Sioux Greyhound. So certainly there is a connection there, of course. And Matt Murray's longtime goalie coach that he works with in the offseason also, I believe, is working, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's working with the Marlies. So I think there's a connection there too. I'd have to check up on that, but I do believe he's in the Leafs organization. And I know that obviously Murray's from Ontario, spends his summers there, and I believe he's a goalie coach that he works out with in the summertime. So certainly there's multiple connections there. Say what you want about Murray. I've seen him play a lot in the past couple years, especially. I've seen pretty well all the Senators games. So I've seen Matt Murray. I've seen him live. I've seen him on TV a lot. I've seen him live as well when he was with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Seen a lot of games there. And, he's had his moments where he's been a really good goaltender. His biggest problem to me is staying healthy. His second problem is inconsistencies. And I think a lot of the inconsistency comes from the fact that he can't stay healthy. So when you're missing time, you get out of your rhythm, and, it's hard to kind of get going on a longer, rhythmic sequence of events, and it's just not something that he's been able to do the past few years. He suffered multiple concussions, which is not good as well. So I do have concerns over his long-term health and ability to stay healthy, and that's ultimately the biggest issue. Something they've run into as well with Campbell before. Campbell's been a great goalie, but he's had his issues staying healthy. Peter Mrazek was having issues staying healthy last year. I don't really know that this is the best move for the Leafs. I do understand that they're somewhat, limited on their options right now for an NHL quality goaltender, given the fact that they've had such a difficult time with Campbell in negotiations. But to me, you could have a cheap Matt Murray. But if you're going to go with, now, are they going to go with Murray and Källgren, or are they going to go with try to bring in another NHL quality goaltender that's maybe making similar or less money and have like a goalie tandem, maybe making $4 million total? Like, that's possible. I don't know. To me, I'd almost rather pay Campbell, but I know that's difficult because of their cap situation, but at least they have trust in him, and I just don't know that they're going to get that with somebody else. There are a lot of rumors about Campbell going to the Oilers. Of course, there's no such thing as tampering in the NHL, right? Now, I know a lot of people have commented on different videos saying, well, isn't there a period of time that UFAs can speak to other teams ahead of free agency? And that is not the case anymore. That used to be. But my understanding is in the last CBA during the pandemic, when they did the memorandum of understanding to extend the CBA, that was taken out. And that's not the case. So you can't really, as a free agent, speak to the other NHL teams until free agency begins. But that there's always deals announced right away like that. As soon as within that first 20 minutes of free agency, you get deals announced coming right, left to right and center. So you can't tell me there's not tampering and there's not conversations being had. But whatever. It sounds like the Oilers are the team that's most ready to pay Campbell's asking price. So assuming he makes it to July 13th, it sounds like that could be his most likely landing spot. But we will see. Darcy Kuemper also out there, Stanley Cup winning goaltender this year with the Avalanche. Sounds like Washington. It seems to be the team that's most likely. But according to other reports and to Ottawa media with good connections, they're claiming that the Senators, if they can move Matt Murray, if this deal happens, that they may go into the goalie market themselves to find another goalie, which I find surprising because they have their starter in Anton Forsberg. They have young Philip Gustafsson, who appears ready and able to be your second goaltender. So I don't really know what they would be up to, unless obviously they'd be looking for an upgrade, but I don't know what exactly they'd be looking at. But the goalie carousel could continue on with them if this Murray deal goes down as well. But there's certainly more teams looking for goalies than there are higher quality goalies available, which is making things difficult. But right now, all indications point to Campbell going to the Oilers, Kuemper going to the Capitals, and Murray being traded to the Leafs. But it's not done until it's done. The intel can change at any moment's notice. By the time I finish recording this video, I could go online and find out that the information has changed yet again. It's happening that quickly because we're getting so close to free agency taking place. So we'll see what happens, and I'll be putting videos up here as the news breaks, so stay tuned for that. When it comes to the Philadelphia Flyers, there's news that they obviously are trying very hard to move the contract of James Van Riemsdyk. 1 year left at $7 million. Apparently, it was multiple attempts at the draft by Chuck Fletcher and his team, but apparently the asking price was astronomically high, so they were not able to do that as of yet. So that's obviously putting a dent in what they're able to do elsewhere. And there's also reports from Philadelphia media suggesting that it sounds like with the acquisition of Tony DeAngelo, that's kind of leading a lot of people to make the assumption here, and it is just that. It's an assumption because it's not confirmed by the team, but it sounds like Ryan Ellis, who was out majority of last year, and Chuck Fletcher has been giving updates on, but it doesn't have any kind of confirmation that he's even going to play next year. We don't even really know the full extent of the injuries, but I'm starting to wonder if he's going to play anymore. I really do, based on what the Flyers media are saying. It just sounds like they're convinced that Ellis is not going to play this year. That's why DeAngelo was brought in, and that now that they're not going to be able to see Ryan Ellis play with Ivan Provorov, that there's a good chance they might try to move Provorov because they've been frustrated with him for the past couple years, ever since he's lost Matt Niskanen as his partner a couple years back. He hasn't been the same defenseman. Seems a little bit lost. Seems a little frustrated. Seems like a fresh start and new scenery could benefit him. So another defenseman to kind of keep in mind here that could be on the market for the right price for the right team. So I don't know. The Flyers are expected to be going into an aggressive retool, and we haven't really seen them do a lot besides the DeAngelo move. They need to be able to move money out before they can really do anything else. They're expected, if he makes it there on July 13th, to be a player for Johnny Gaudreau, but we don't know what's going on with him. All is very quiet in Calgary still. There's really no news to report on that, but as of right now, the way things stand in Philly, they can't go after Gaudreau unless they move out some money. So if you see the Flyers leading into the 13th, be able to move a couple contracts, then that's going to tell us that they're going hard after Gaudreau and they might stand a good chance to get him. If you don't see that, then I'm going to say that it's not really likely. It's almost impossible. So we will see. Now, also in the Montreal Canadiens organization, of course, they saw a lot of things at the NHL draft. They made a fairly big splash. All of a sudden, the first overall pick. The crowd was great, full house there, and obviously lots of great reactions, everything going down. They pull off the trades with the Islanders sending Romanov, then they pick up Kirby Dach from Chicago. They were a busy team, and certainly, expected, made a fairly big splash early on in the first round. Now, of course, they've been getting lots of calls on some players that they weren't even really looking to move, and with the goalie carousel that we talked about here today being so busy in so many spots that need to be filled and teams having a hard time doing it because of the lack of goaltenders available, the Habs have been getting a lot of calls on Jake Allen. Now, apparently, Jake is not somebody they want to move. They have a lot of uncertainty over the future of Carey Price, so they don't even know that he's going to play next year. So that's obviously an issue that they need to be prepared for. They have Samuel Montembeault, who's a pending RFA, who's not, he did okay last year, but he's certainly not a high-level goaltender. They want to give Caden Primo time to play in the American Hockey League still and continue to develop. So obviously, and they've been linked to some other goalies too, but, Jake's not a player they want to move because he's the one NHL quality goaltender that they can bank on being in the lineup next year, right? So essentially, word is out of those reports that they're getting lots of inquiries. They really don't want to move him, but if they get a deal that they just can't pass up, then it might happen. Same goes for Josh Anderson. They're getting lots of calls on Anderson too, but it's not something that they really care to do. But if then you knock their socks off with an offer, it could happen. But teams that you see, especially, not get what they want in free agency, and there's going to be some teams out there because there's not a lot to be signed, are going to be turning to the trade market, and there's not even a lot of goalies that are likely to be available, so you might see them pushing the Habs and up on an offer and overpaying. It's hard to say, but Jake is getting a lot of attention, and the Habs will only move them if the price goes up and comes closer, because right now they have to rely on them themselves, so not something they really care to do. But let me know your thoughts on what we discussed here today. Are we going to see this Matt Murray trade to Toronto? Let me know what you all think is going to be involved, what kind of sweeteners, what kind of salary retention, how's it going to look? I'd love to see what you guys think in the comments so we can discuss it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.